Imagine this: a single military action halfway across the world sparks an instant global crisis. We're talking supply chains snarled, energy prices going through the roof, and a massive international legal showdown. It sounds like something out of a movie, right? But it's a scenario that shows just how incredibly fragile our interconnected world really is. So, okay, let's dive into this fictional crisis because it helps us understand some very, very real vulnerabilities. To really get a grip on the global ripple effects, we've got to start at the source, the event that kicked the whole thing off, the splash. So how did we get here? Well, the path to this crisis was short and it was steep. It all starts in the middle of 2025, with a U.S. operation targeting Iranian nuclear sites. By the end of that year, any hope for diplomacy is basically dead. Iran walks away from a nuclear deal, insisting on its right to enrich uranium. And then, on February 28, 2026, the whole situation just explodes. The U.S. and Israel launch a huge, coordinated air assault. In those first strikes, Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, is killed. And the retaliation? It's swift. The very next month, Iran hits back with missiles and then makes a game-changing move. It shuts down the Strait of Hormuz. And with that one single act, Iran didn't just strike back at its enemies. It effectively put a chokehold on the entire global economy. So, what exactly is the Strait of Hormuz, and why is it such a huge deal? Well, look, it's a pretty narrow strip of water, but you could argue it's the most important waterway on the entire planet. It's the only way for ships to get from the Persian Gulf out to the open ocean. That makes it the absolute main artery for some of the world's biggest oil producers. The numbers flowing through here are they're staggering. We're talking 20 million barrels of oil every single day. Just try to picture that. It's like an unimaginable river of crude oil flowing out to the rest of the world. And to put that in perspective, those 20 million barrels add up to 20% of all the petroleum used by the entire planet. 1/5 of the energy that powers our cars, runs our factories, heats our homes. Suddenly, the tap was turned off right at the source. And in dollar terms, we are talking about $600 billion in energy trade moving through this one little choke point every single year. And then, in March of 2026, all of that just came to a dead stop.
The impact was immediate and, well, it was brutal. Closing the strait sent a shockwave that rattled the very foundations of the global economy.
This table from the Dallas Fed really shows the direct link between time and economic pain. So check out that top row. If the strait is shut down for just one quarter, the price of oil jumps to $98. Okay, painful, but maybe manageable. Now, follow that down to the bottom row. If that closure drags on for 3 quarters, the price skyrockets to $132 a barrel. The length of the shutdown is absolutely everything. And here's what that means for all of us. That crazy oil price spike slams the brakes on the world's economy. Hard. In just the first quarter of the shutdown, global GDP shrinks by almost 3%. And if the strait stays closed for 3 quarters, that bottom row again, the global economy just stays in recession. It shrinks for 3 straight quarters. We're talking about a full-blown global recession, all triggered by one closed waterway. For the companies that actually move all our stuff around the world, the system doesn't just bend, it completely snaps. Just to reroute one ship around Africa adds up to 2 weeks and about $1 million in fuel. Insurance premiums for war risk, they jump 12 times their normal rate in some cases. All of a sudden, everything from medicines to electronics to fertilizer is facing shortages and massive price hikes. And you know what? The big shipping companies like Maersk just throw their hands up and suspend all traffic in the whole region. And this huge geopolitical mess, it quickly turns into a total nightmare of contracts and legal fine print. As this law firm, Pillsbury, put it, the difference between a painful delay and a loss that's not even insured can come down to just a few lines in a policy document. For businesses trying to survive this, everything hangs on that fine print.
So, beyond all the economic chaos, the shutdown ignited this fierce international legal battle, a really fundamental fight over the laws that are supposed to govern the seas. Okay, so the core of the legal dispute is basically this. On one side, in that left column, you have Iran's argument. It's based on an idea called innocent passage, which would give them a whole lot of power to restrict shipping if they say it's for security reasons. But on the other side, pretty much the entire rest of the world operates under a different rule called transit passage, which guarantees free and totally unobstructed passage for all ships. Now, Iran never actually signed the UN treaty that lays this all out, but the international community basically says, tough, it's binding law for everybody. So, how did the world officially respond to Iran's claims? Well, the verdict came down loud and clear, right from the UN Security Council. And Resolution 2817 did not pull any punches. It flat out condemned Iran's closure as a breach of international law and called it a serious threat to international peace and security. It doubled down on the right of free navigation and demanded that Iran stop messing with shipping immediately. And this wasn't just a few countries talking. It was eventually backed by about 30 states, a really strong global consensus. So we've seen the what, but we really need to understand the why. What's the context here? What's behind this regime, its power, and its decision to take such a huge world-altering risk? Now, to dig into that why, we're going to lean on some analysis from the Republican Policy Committee. And it's really important to be transparent about the source here because this gives us one specific viewpoint on the regime's structure and its power. According to this analysis, the ultimate power is in the hands of the supreme leader. But the real engine of the regime is the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. And this is way more than just an army. It's a force of 150,000 that answers only to the supreme leader. And its power is immense. It controls huge chunks of the economy and runs the country's entire missile program, which, by the way, is the biggest and most varied in the whole Middle East. Iran also projects its power indirectly through what it calls the axis of resistance. You can think of this as a network of powerful proxy militias spread across the region. This includes Hezbollah in Lebanon, sitting on a massive arsenal of rockets, the Houthis in Yemen, who've already shown they can disrupt shipping in the Red Sea, and powerful militias that have a huge amount of political and military influence inside Iraq. And then there's a huge economic piece to this puzzle. This chart tells a pretty wild story. In 2023, a staggering 89% of all of Iran's crude oil exports went to one single country, China. That economic relationship, that lifeline, is a massive factor in the geopolitical math of any conflict that involves Iran. So when you pull all these threads together, the picture that emerges is, well, it's pretty clear. Our global system is incredibly fragile. A single military event can set off a worldwide economic crisis. Our supply chains are way more vulnerable than we like to think. And the energy that powers pretty much everything we do depends on safe passage through just a handful of these narrow, highly contested choke points. Look, this entire story has been based on a fictional scenario, but the vulnerability it exposed is terrifyingly real. And it leaves us with a really important question to think about. The Strait of Hormuz is just one choke point. How many others is our modern world built on top of? And what happens when the next one closes?